This is Mr. Rusty. He used to be a happy man, but now he's sad. There's no magic in life anymore, he said. You see, once upon a time, when he played his barrel organ with the birds on top, all the children used to come and ride on his roundabout. But now they didn't come anymore. No magic, said Mr. Rusty to the horse. Very likely, said the horse, who was secretly quite pleased with the rest he was having. No magic, said Mr. Rusty. No magic. He sat on the horse to try and cheer himself up. Gee up, he said, trying hard to enjoy himself. Anyone coming? No. So it didn't do any good, and he got off and walked away, and found that the postman had been. At least he supposed it must be the postman, because who else brings parcels? And it was addressed to Mr. Rusty. The writing was very bad, but it was definitely addressed to Mr. Rusty. And there's only one thing to do with a parcel that's addressed to you, and that is open it. Carefully, because you never know what might be inside. Do you? Who are you? Said Mr. Rusty. I'm Zebedee. Zebedee. What do you do? Said Mr. Rusty. Magic. Magic. And Zebedee seemed to know all about Mr. Rusty's trouble, about the roundabout, and no children, and no magic, and all that. And he told Mr. Rusty he would make everything all right again. And he did. As you will see tomorrow. Tell them whoever catches the balloon will get a special surprise, said Zebedee. Yes, whoever catches the balloon, said Mr. Rusty, will get a special surprise. And who caught it, and what the surprise was, we shall see. Tomorrow. What's your name? Said Dougal. Brian, said the snail. Brian? Said Dougal. Snails aren't called Brian. Snails are mollusks. Aren't you funny? Said the snail. Zebedee told Florence that a very strange thing had happened in the garden. A large hole had appeared out of nowhere, and Dougal kept falling in. Poor Dougal, said Florence. Well, better do something about it, hadn't you? Said Zebedee, briskly.
Yes, said Florence thoughtfully. So Florence told the others about the problem, and they agreed that something must be done. So they went to view the problem. And one of them viewed the problem very closely. We need a bridge, he said. A bridge is what we need. A bridge, of course, said Florence. A bridge, of course. So they started to build a bridge. We're building a bridge, they said. A bridge, a bridge, a bridge. We're building a bridge. A bridge, said Florence. About time, said Dougal. Why, they said. Because holes are dangerous, said Dougal. Why, they said. Dogs can fall in, said Dougal. And they laughed. So Dougal decided to try the bridge out, to see if it was safe for dogs. Now let's let's have a little look at this. Said Dougal. Anyone else like to try? I might have been on that, said Dougal. I might have done myself an injury. Call that a bridge? Huh. Huh. Everyone all right? Said Zebedee. Our bridge broke, said Florence. How did that happen? Said Zebedee. Dougal stepped on it, said Florence. Typical, said Zebedee. No gratitude, said Dougal to himself. Dogs endanger themselves to test the inventions of man, and what happens? Not even a lump of sugar as a reward. Alas for dogs. Good night, good night.
Florence asked Zebedee what she should do. Can't you think of anything? He said. No, said Florence. See what turns up then, said Zebedee. All right, said Florence. Dougal and Brian were camping. Were you a scout? Said Brian. Of course, said Dougal. I was a brownie, said Brian. A brownie? Said Dougal. You couldn't have been a brownie. You are not a girl. Well, it was ages before they found out, said Brian. I don't believe a word of it, said Dougal. Oh dear, said Dylan, like I broke a string. So he looked about, like he would, for another one. Lucky me, said Dylan, and he took the string from Dougal's tent. Meanwhile, Florence met Dougal and Brian. Hello, 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 they all said. We've got a surprise for you, said Dougal. A big surprise, said Brian. What is it, said Florence. You'll see, said Brian. Show the way, Brown Owl, said Dougal. Brown Owl? Who's that? Said Florence. Oh, he's joking, said Brian. Everyone knows I'm a snail. Oh, come on, said Dougal. So Florence went to see the surprise. And she wasn't the only one to get a surprise. What's all this? Said Dougal. Greetings, greetings, said Dylan. What about this tent? Said Dougal. What about it? Said Dylan. We can put it back up, said Florence. Put it back up, man, said Dylan. You've taken the string, said Dougal. I need the string, said Dylan. He needs the string, said Florence. He needs something, said Dougal dangerously. And he'll get it if he's not careful, too. We must think of something, said Florence. And just then Brian arrived with something wrapped round his horns. What have you got there? Said Dougal slowly. It's a tent rope, said Brian brightly. Oh, Brian, you are clever, said Florence. Am I? Said Brian. Well, I just thought it might come in useful, that's all. So with Brian's rope, they put the tent back up. Didn't think he had it in him, said Dougal. Didn't think what? Real clever snail, said Dylan. Should go far, succeed in life. Florence looked at him. Try to be a little more careful in future, she said severely. And now, play us a tune. Mood's gone, man, said Dylan. Mood's gone. All gone. And he left. Don't hurry back, said Dougal. Ah, well, said Florence. All's well that ends well, I suppose. Bed man, said Zebedee. Dougal was in the garden when he noticed something. What's this? What's this? Scent? Perfume? He asked Zebedee if he noticed anything. No, said Zebedee. Not a je ne sais quoi, a certain smell in the air, said Dougal. No, I don't, said Zebedee. Of course, I realize you lack my delicate sense of smell, but surely you catch a breath of something. No, said Zebedee. Nose not working, said Dougal. Never has worked, said Zebedee. Really, said Dougal. Really, said Zebedee. Well, someone is making scent in the garden. The smell is very strong. I'll ask Florence, said Zebedee. Ask her...
Yes? Ask her if she prefers English lavender or Scottish heather for perfume, will you? Said Dougal. English lavender or Scottish heather. All right, said Zebedee. English lavender or Scottish heather, he muttered. And he told Florence all about the scent. And Mr. Rusty said he'd noticed a sort of smell about the garden too. Someone must be making perfume, said Zebedee. Well, who could it be? Said Florence. Well, you'd better go and find out, hadn't you? Said Zebedee. Yes, I'd better, said Florence. And bring me a bottle of lavender water, said Mr. Rusty. It's my favourite. Dougal will help you with his sensitive nose, said Zebedee. All right, said Florence. Dougal met Dillon. May I ask a question? He said. Be my guest, said Dillon. Aren't rabbits supposed to be bouncy and lively? Said Dougal. We're rethinking the image, said Dillon. Oh, I see, said Dougal. And he asked Dillon if he smelt anything. Like carrot stew, said Dillon. No, not exactly, said Dougal. More like violets and heather. Oh, brother, said Dillon. And he went on his way. Funny fellow. Florence asked Dougal if he knew where the scent was coming from, and Dougal said he didn't. So they decided to try and find it. They looked and they sniffed. I think we're getting warmer, said Florence. Well, it's certainly getting smellier, said Dougal. Pity you're not a bloodhound, Dougal, said Florence. Great floppy things, said Dougal. Ha! I believe we've found it. And of course, they were right. Who else would make perfume in the garden but Mr. McHenry? Nice smell, Mr. McHenry, they said. Oh, I'm glad you like it, said Mr. McHenry. Is it English lavender? Said Florence. And Scottish heather. Both? Both. Oh, I'm not sure the clans are going to like this, said Dougal. Haven't got any essence of sugar, have you? He said. Oh, Dougal, you, said Florence. But Mr. McHenry had gone anyway. And Florence told Zebedee all about it. Did you remember Mr. Rusty's lavender water? Said Zebedee. No, said Florence. Perhaps I'll make some essence of sugar tomorrow, said Dougal. Good night. Mr. McHenry was sorting out his plans for sowing seeds in the garden. He had some special seeds he wanted to try out, and he was just wondering where to put them. Now where, he thought. Zebedee asked him what he was doing. Sowing seeds, said Mr. McHenry, and Zebedee told him that he had some special seeds too. Look, he said. You have green fingers, my friend, said Mr. McHenry. Yes, that and a little magic, said Zebedee. You have to have a little magic. All seeds are a bit magical, I always think, said Mr. McHenry, mystically. Dillon came along to see what was happening. What's the scene, man? He said. Mr. McHenry decided to pick the beans before it rained, and he asked Dillon to help. Work, man, said Dillon. You want to give me bad dreams? Let it rain, real cool. Lazy thing, said Mr. McHenry. And Dillon said he wasn't lazy, not really. He loved work. He could look at it for hours, and had done so often. But he said he wouldn't mind a few beans to eat. No work, no beans, said Mr. McHenry. No work, no beans, said Dillon sadly. Story of my life, man. Story of my life. And after looking at the beans again, he left. Like, goodbye, he said. Mr. McHenry sighed. Youth, youth, he said. And he was just wondering what to do about the jumping beans when Dougal came along. Mercy on us, said Dougal. Fleas! Help! Assistance! Aid! Mr. McHenry tried to explain, but Dougal was not going to risk being invaded, so he left. Fleas! 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 Oh! Fleas! Zebedee told Florence about the beans and how Mr. McHenry was afraid it would snow and spoil them. Couldn't you do some magic? Said Florence. And Zebedee said he probably could if he was put to it. So he thought. And finally decided that if it was going to rain or snow or hail, the beans should be protected in some way. What a good idea, said Florence. So Zebedee put the beans under glass. What a good idea, said Mr. McHenry. And Dillon decided he would go to sleep near the beans. And in case they jumped, he said, I'll go to sleep with my mouth open, man. When Zebedee arrived, Florence told him that she was feeling a little tired and would just like to take a short, restful walk. In the garden? Said Zebedee. I think so, said Florence. Dougal was taking a walk too. Oh, a rocking chair. Just what I've always wanted. Oh, joy and delight. But Dougal's joy and delight was short-lived. Hello, said Brian. Oh, hello, said Dougal. Is that your rocking chair? He said. Yes, said Brian. Just what I've always wanted. Dougal thought very hard. What are you thinking about, old thing? Said Brian. Oh, nothing. Nothing. Go on, tell me, said Brian. Go on. Oh, it's just that I was out for a walk and I saw something, said Dougal. But you wouldn't be interested. What was it? Said Brian. A lettuce, said Dougal casually. A lettuce, said Brian eagerly. Yes, a huge lettuce. Amazing, really. Must have been nearly as big as you. Amazing. Well, goodbye. Wait, said Brian. Where is it? Oh, it's quite close, said Dougal. Why don't you go and see? It does sound very tasty, said Brian. And Dougal thought his plan to get Brian out of the chair had worked. But as he discovered, the best laid plans of mice and dogs sometimes go wrong. Shall we go then, old lettuce hunter? Said Brian. Wait there, rocking chair, said Dougal. Florence, meanwhile, had had her restful walk, and she found the rocking chair too. Oh, just what I've always wanted, she said. Good morning, said Mr. McHenry. Morning, said Florence. Is that a rocking chair? Said Mr. McHenry. Yes, it is, said Florence. Just what I've always wanted, said Mr. McHenry. Haven't you got one? No. Well, said Florence, I think this one's been abandoned. Would you like it? Well, it's just what I've always wanted, said Mr. McHenry. So Florence said have it, and he took it. Dougal, meanwhile, had managed to lose Brian and was hurrying back to his rocking chair. Hello, Dougal, said Florence. Oh, hello, Florence, said Dougal. Oh, where is it? Where's it gone? Have you lost something, Dougal? Said Florence. No, nothing. Have you been here long? And Florence told him she hadn't been there very long, but she'd seen Mr. McHenry and given him a rocking chair and... Wait, said Dougal. A rocking chair? I fear the worst. Oh, was it yours? Said Florence. In a manner of speaking, yes, said Dougal. Oh, I thought it had been abandoned, said Florence. Just that I always wanted one, said Dougal. Oh, I'm so sorry, said Florence, but I didn't know. And she told Dougal that if he went to see Mr. McHenry, he'd be sure to let him have a rock. And Dougal thought this was a very good idea. He may have some sugar too, he said. And he left. And Florence waited to see Zebedee to tell him all about it. A rocking chair, said Zebedee, just what I've always wanted. Florence met Zebedee at the roundabout. Hello, she said. There's a great search going on in the garden, said Zebedee. Oh, said Florence. Really? Yes, be lucky, said Zebedee. Let me see now. 1, 2, 3, no. 1, 2, 3, no. 1, 2, 3, no. What you doing, old Shaggy? Said Brian. I'm counting clover leaves, said Dougal, if you must know. Clover leaves? Said Brian. Clover leaves. What's all this 1, 2, 3 then? Said Brian. Well, I want to say 1, 2, 3, 4, said Dougal. Then why don't you? Said Brian. Oh dear, said Dougal. I'm trying to find one with 4 leaves, he said. Is that a worthwhile project? Said Brian. 4-leaf clovers are lucky, said Dougal, and I could do with some luck with you around. Well, I'll help you, said Brian. And they both went to look for 4-leaf clovers. 1, 2, 3, no. 1, 2, 3, no. Is that one? No. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. Easy. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. No, where have they all gone? Just my luck, of course, entirely surrounded by clover and not a 4-leaf one in sight. Typical, typical, typical. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. Florence asked Brian what he was doing, and Brian told her about Dougal and the 4-leaf clover. Oh, yes, said Florence. Funny, isn't it? Yes, said Florence. But he would have one, and I said I'd find him one, being a vegetable specialist, said Brian. Are they easy to find? Said Florence. Simple, said Brian. And Florence found one. Oh, she said. Got 4 leaves? Said Brian. Florence counted. Yes, she said. I think the difficult ones to find are the 3-leaf ones. Florence picked another. "Shall we go and show Dougal?" she said. "Won't he be overjoyed?" said Brian. 1, 2, 3, no. 1, 2, 3, no. 1, 2. Oh, twos now. Typical, typical. "I don't think he's found one," said Brian. "No, I don't think he has," said Florence. "Do you think he's counting right?" said Brian. And Florence said that perhaps they should give some of theirs to Dougal. "You give them to him," she said. "All right," said Brian. "Yoo-hoo! Yoo-hoo! Yoo-hoo!" What, said Dougal. "Want any 4-leaf clovers?" said Brian. "I don't believe it," said Dougal. "Where did you get those?" "I found them in the highways and byways," said Brian. "For you." "I have searched my nose to the bone," said Dougal. "Hello, Dougal," said Florence. And Dougal presented her with a 4-leaf clover. "I've searched everywhere," he said, "and finally found one. It's for you, for luck." "Oh, that's very kind of you," said Florence. And Dougal gave one to Brian as well. "You could do with some luck," he said. "I must confess I'm a little confused," said Brian. 4-leaf clovers are lucky," said Florence. "So take it," said Dougal, "and consider yourself lucky." "You haven't got a bit of lettuce instead, have you?" said Brian. "No," said Florence. And she told Zebedee all about it. "I know something else that's lucky," said Zebedee. "It's lucky I was in time to say time for bed, isn't it?"